What if I told you that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't reaching the stars, but crawling into the dirt to survive what came after? Welcome back to All About the Lore, where today we're diving deep into the rust-stained, machine-haunted world of ARC Raiders, a game where Earth's surface belongs to the robots, and humanity's last flicker of hope burns in the tunnels below. This is the story of how civilization fell twice, how the wealthy abandoned everyone else, and how mysterious machines from the sky turned our home into a graveyard. So settle in, because we're about to explore every corner of this post-apocalyptic world, from the buried cities swallowed by sand to the frozen research facility holding secrets humanity might not want to uncover. ARC Raiders takes us to the year 2180, where Earth has become a hostile wasteland ruled by autonomous machines called ARC. The few humans who remain live underground in crumbling cities and tunnel networks, venturing to the deadly surface only when desperation demands it. Players take on the role of raiders, scavengers who risk everything to gather supplies and keep their underground community alive. But beneath this extraction shooter gameplay lies a surprisingly deep narrative about environmental collapse, class warfare, mysterious technology, and humanity's refusal to give up even when extinction seems inevitable. The world of ARC Raiders is built through environmental storytelling, quest narratives, codex entries, and the gradual unfolding of secrets hidden in rusted hulks and abandoned facilities. To understand where humanity is now, we need to go back to before the fall, before the machines, before the sky started dropping death. We need to understand what was lost and how losing it broke the world in ways that go far beyond simple destruction. The civilization that existed before the collapse had reached heights of technological achievement that seem almost mythical to the survivors huddled in Speranza today. This was humanity at its absolute peak, standing on the threshold of a new age of space exploration and unprecedented scientific advancement. The ruins, scattered across what's now called the Rust Belt, tell the story of a society that had conquered energy production, mastered advanced construction techniques, and developed technology sophisticated enough to launch regular missions beyond Earth's atmosphere. The massive structures still standing today, the dams and spaceports and research centers, represent engineering feats that current survivors can barely comprehend, let alone replicate. But this golden age was built on foundations more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. The same industrial might and technological progress that allowed humanity to reach for the stars also pushed Earth's ecosystems to their breaking point. For decades, perhaps centuries, the warning signs accumulated. Scientists raised alarms about rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and the cascading effects of unchecked resource extraction. But economic pressures, political inertia, and the sheer momentum of industrial civilization meant that meaningful change remained just out of reach. The world kept spinning, kept consuming, kept building toward a future that would never arrive. Then the collapse began, not as a single catastrophic event, but as a cascade of interconnected disasters that fed on each other until they became unstoppable. Massive earthquakes shook regions that had been stable for millennia, triggered by shifts in tectonic stress that scientists had warned about but couldn't prevent. These quakes triggered volcanic eruptions, including a devastating explosion of Mount Vesuvius that buried the surrounding area under ash and pyroclastic flows. You can still see the evidence of this eruption scattered across the dam battlegrounds, volcanic rocks mixed with the remains of civilization. The earthquakes and eruptions were only the beginning. Global temperature increases accelerated beyond even the worst predictions, triggering feedback loops that made the planet increasingly hostile to human habitation. Wildfires raged across continents, consuming forests and cities alike, filling the atmosphere with choking smoke that blotted out the sun for months at a time. Coastal regions that had housed billions of people vanished beneath rising seas as polar ice sheets collapsed far faster than models had suggested possible. The Mediterranean coastline of southern Italy, where much of the game takes place, saw dramatic changes as sea levels rose and the geography itself transformed. Air quality deteriorated to dangerous levels across most of the planet. The The combination of volcanic ash, wildfire smoke, and industrial pollution created an atmosphere that was toxic to breathe in many regions. Water sources became contaminated. Agricultural systems collapsed as weather patterns became chaotic and unpredictable. The carefully maintained infrastructure of global civilization, the power grids and supply chains and communication networks that held everything together, began failing in cascading fashion. When the power went out in one region, it triggered failures in adjacent areas, creating a domino effect that eventually left most of the world dark and disconnected. The social order disintegrated along with the physical infrastructure. Governments lost the ability to provide basic services or maintain authority as resources dwindled and populations became desperate. Mass migrations overwhelmed border regions as people fled areas that had become uninhabitable. Cities collapsed into chaos. The rule of law broke down. In some regions, warlords and strongmen seized control of remaining resources. In others, communities banded together for mutual survival, forming the kind of scattered tribal societies that would later struggle to rebuild. The death toll was unimaginable. Billions perished in the initial catastrophes and the famines, plagues, and conflicts that followed. The few scattered communities that managed to survive found themselves isolated from one another, cut off from the accumulated knowledge and technology that had defined human civilization. The generation that lived through the collapse became a bridge between two worlds, one of unimaginable plenty and technological marvel, the other of desperate scrabbling survival in the ruins of everything that had been lost. But for all the horror of the environmental catastrophe, the collapse revealed something even darker about humanity, a truth that would poison the survivors' attempts to rebuild for generations to come. When faced with extinction, those with power and wealth didn't attempt to save everyone. They saved themselves and abandoned the rest to die. As the collapse accelerated and it became clear that Earth was becoming uninhabitable, a select group of humanity's elite enacted a plan that had probably been in development for years. This was the Exodus, humanity's most ambitious and most morally bankrupt achievement. Somewhere in the chaos of the dying world, advanced rockets were prepared, launch facilities were secured, and the chosen few began their escape to the stars. The Assera spaceport stands today as a monument to this betrayal. Its launch towers are visible for miles, colossal structures reaching toward the heavens like accusing fingers. Walking through the spaceport's ruins, you can still see the evidence of the frantic evacuation. The rocket assembly buildings where these vessels were prepared, the control towers from which the launches were coordinated, the departure and arrival buildings that processed the lucky few who had secured passage off-world. The entire facility speaks to a level of technological sophistication and coordinated effort that required enormous resources and planning. Who exactly managed to escape remains unclear to the survivors, but the evidence suggests it was primarily the ultra-wealthy and powerful. The game's lore refers to them as valorous survivors, though that description drips with bitter irony. There was nothing valorous about abandoning your species to extinction while you fled to safety. The graffiti scattered across the spaceport makes the survivors' feelings clear. Messages scrawled on crumbling walls read, "Only the rich leave, and make room for all." These aren't just complaints about inequality. They're epitaphs for a civilization that chose to save a few thousand at the expense of billions. The technology required for the Exodus represented the pinnacle of pre-collapse achievement. These weren't simple rockets making short hops to low orbit. They were interstellar vessels capable of sustaining populations for the decades or centuries required to reach habitable systems beyond our solar system. The engineering involved was staggering, representing knowledge and capabilities that the survivors can barely understand, let alone reproduce. Scattered throughout the Rust Belt, you can still find fragments of Exodus-era technology, advanced materials and components that are far superior to anything the underground communities can manufacture. The departure of the Exodus fleet marked a fundamental break in human history. Those who left took with them not just their lives, but the accumulated knowledge, technical expertise, and resources that might have helped those left behind rebuild. libraries, databases, skilled engineers and scientists all vanished into the void, leaving the survivors to struggle forward with whatever scraps they could preserve. The resentment this created runs deep in the underground communities. To the people of Speranza and other settlements, the Exodus represents humanity's original sin, the moment when those with power chose survival over solidarity. But the Exodus also created an enduring mystery that haunts the current timeline. Where did they go? Did they survive? And most troubling of all, did they ever come back? Because there are clues, unsettling hints scattered throughout the game's lore that suggest the Exodus survivors might not be as gone as everyone assumed. The advanced technology showing up in ARC machines, the fact that the machines fell from space rather than emerging from Earth itself, the compatibility between ARC components and human technology, as if they were designed by people who understood human engineering principles. These details point toward a disturbing possibility that we'll explore later. For those left behind on the dying planet, the Exodus marked rock bottom. But it wasn't the end. Humanity has a stubborn refusal to accept extinction, and even in the ashes of everything that was lost, that refusal would spark a period of genuine hope, brief, fragile, but real. The generations immediately following the collapse were defined by pure survival. Small scattered communities huddled in whatever shelter they could find, tunnel networks beneath dead cities, reinforced bunkers, natural cave systems. These people lived like our distant ancestors, fighting for every scrap of food and drop of water, watching the surface through terrified eyes, waiting for conditions to improve. Many communities died out, others merged together. Slowly, painfully, a new form of human society began to take shape in the darkness. Then came what the survivors call the sunrise, and the name captures the hope that this period represented. After who knows how many generations of darkness, of living like rats in the walls of a dead world, conditions on the surface began to stabilize. The volcanic ash settled. The wildfires burned themselves out. The weather patterns, while still hostile, became somewhat predictable again. The air quality improved to levels where humans could breathe without immediately poisoning themselves. Plant life began to return to some regions. It wasn't a return to the pre-collapse paradise, but it was livable, and that was everything. Humanity emerged from underground, like flowers pushing through concrete. Communities that had been isolated from each other for generations made contact again. Trade routes were established, knowledge was shared. Most importantly, people began the slow process of reclaiming the surface, turning the remnants of the old world into the foundations of something new. This was the period when settlements like what would eventually become Toledo began to take real form, when the scattered tribes and bunker communities started consolidating into actual societies. The technology of the sunrise period shows interesting characteristics that tell us a lot about this era. The survivors were surrounded by the ruins of incredibly advanced pre-collapse civilization, but they'd lost much of the knowledge needed to understand or reproduce that technology. What you see scattered across the Rust Belt is a patchwork of rediscovered pre-collapse tech mixed with cruder post-collapse innovations. The massive dam still stands because the engineering was so robust it survived the collapse, but the generators and control systems that were added later are visibly more primitive, cobbled together from salvaged components and reinvented principles. This creates the anachronistic feel that permeates the game world. Massive concrete structures from before the fall, standing next to jury-rigged electronics that look decades out of date. Advanced materials used in crude applications because nobody remembers their original purpose. It's the visual language of a civilization trying to climb back up from the pit, standing on the shoulders of ancestors whose achievements they can barely comprehend. The people of the sunrise period were scavengers of their own history, piecing together a future from fragments of a past they couldn't fully understand. During the sunrise, humanity began to develop something approaching optimism again. Communities were growing, food production was becoming more reliable, the population was increasing. There were even attempts to preserve and transmit knowledge, to establish schools and libraries so that future generations wouldn't have to rediscover everything from scratch. The people of this era looked at the ruins around them and saw not just destruction, but raw materials for rebuilding. They saw a future. The Rust Belt during this period would have been a landscape of contrasts, ancient cities being slowly reclaimed by human habitation, farms and settlements springing up in regions that had been abandoned for generations, trade caravans moving between communities, the ever-present ruins serving as both resource and reminder. Life was hard, survival was never guaranteed, but humanity had survived the unsurvivable and was clawing its way back toward something approaching civilization. This period of reconstruction may have lasted for decades, perhaps even approaching a century, long enough for multiple generations to be born who had never experienced the worst of the collapse. Long enough for the environmental catastrophe to fade from immediate memory into history and legend. Long enough for humanity to believe, with cautious but real hope, that the worst was over and the future belonged to them again. This makes what happened next even more devastating. Because just when humanity thought it had survived the apocalypse, the real nightmare began. Just as some degree of civilization had returned, something appeared in the sky. Crude machines like metal meteors began falling from orbit. The survivors would come to call them ARC, autonomous robotic constructs, or autonomous recon combatants, depending on who you ask. Whatever their Gadar name, they represented a threat that made the environmental collapse look merciful by comparison. This was the first wave, and it would define the next stage of humanity's struggle for survival in ways nobody could have anticipated. The initial encounters with ARC machines must have been utterly bewildering. After everything humanity had been through, after clawing their way back from near extinction, machines started falling from space and immediately began hunting people. There was no warning, no communication, no negotiation. The ARCs simply appeared and started killing with mechanical efficiency. The first wave machines were crude compared to the sophisticated hunters that plagued the surface today, but they were still far beyond anything the struggling survivors could field against them. These early ARCs showed clear differences from their second wave descendants. Their designs were bulkier, less refined, as if they were prototypes or first-generation models. The metal was simpler, the movement less fluid, the tactical behaviors more predictable. You can still find the husks of these first-wave machines scattered across the Rust Belt, half-buried metal corpses rusting in swamps and stuck in sand dunes. They look distinctly different from current ARC units, bulkier and more primitive, which raises interesting questions about whoever or whatever is producing these machines. Why would they send crude prototypes first, then follow up with more advanced models? Were they testing humanity's defenses, or did the technology improve between waves? The first wave attack forced humanity to completely reorganize around survival. The scattered communities of the Sunrise period had to rapidly develop coordinated defensive strategies. Raiders, the term that would come to define the scavengers and fighters who ventured topside, began to organize into effective combat units. They learned through painful trial and error how to fight the machines, discovered their weak points, developed tactics that worked. The learning curve was steep and paid for in blood, but humanity has always excelled at adapting to new forms of violence. The decade of war that followed reshaped the Rust Belt. Certain locations became major battlegrounds, places where humans made their stand against the machine tide. The dam, officially known as the Alcantara power plant, became one of the most important defensive positions. Raiders assembled there in large numbers, using the defensible terrain and existing infrastructure to create a strong point that could withstand repeated ARC assaults. The swamps and forests around the dam turned into killing fields where humans and machines fought for control. The toxicity of the water in those swamps today might not just be from environmental damage, but from the residue of this prolonged conflict. Victory Ridge represented the culminating engagement of the first wave conflict. Here, raiders from multiple communities came together in what was essentially the last major battle against the first wave machines. The details of what exactly happened at Victory Ridge are lost to time, but the result was clear. The first wave was defeated, or at least fought to a standstill. The machines stopped falling from the sky. The survivors had won, or so they thought. What they'd actually achieved was a temporary reprieve. The period between the first and second waves lasted somewhere between 20 and 30 years. This represents a full generation, long enough for children to be born and grow to adulthood without experiencing the constant terror of machine attacks. The veterans of the first wave became legends, respected elders whose stories about the conflict seemed increasingly distant and perhaps exaggerated to those who hadn't lived through it. Humanity returned to the work of rebuilding, but this time with the knowledge that the surface was fundamentally dangerous and that threats could come from beyond Earth itself. The underground communities expanded and consolidated during this interwave period. Toledo grew from a collection of scattered bunker communities into a real city, a patchwork of independent districts called contradas, connected by tunnels and shared infrastructure. Speranza emerged as one of these districts, founded by survivors including Celeste, who had lost her home multiple times to ARC attacks during the first wave. The tunnel networks, called the tubes, were expanded and fortified, creating a web of connections between settlements that allowed for trade and communication while providing protection from surface threats. This period also saw significant advancement in salvage and reconstruction techniques. Raiders became more than just fighters. They became specialized scavengers who knew how to identify valuable pre-collapse technology and how to adapt it for current needs. The workshop culture that's so central to current Speranza society developed during these years. People learned to craft weapons from salvaged materials, to repair and modify equipment, to make do with what they could find rather than what they wished they had. But the peace was fragile, built on hope rather than security. Some veterans of the first wave remained vigilant, suspicious that the machines would return. Shani, who would become Speranza's head of security, developed her reputation for paranoia during this period, preparing contingency plans for contingency plans, refusing to believe that humanity was truly safe. History would prove her caution justified. The second wave began exactly as the first had, with machines falling from the sky. But the survivors who had defeated the first wave quickly realized this was different. The new ARCs were sleeker, faster, deadlier. They showed tactical sophistication that the crude first-wave machines had lacked. They adapted to human defensive strategies. They coordinated their attacks with frightening intelligence. This wasn't a repeat of the previous conflict. This was an extinction-level threat. Humanity discovered, to its horror, that the 20 to 30 years of peace had actually worked against them in crucial ways. A generation had grown up without experiencing the constant terror of machine warfare. The veterans who remembered the first wave were aging. Many had died, and their hard-won knowledge had been imperfectly passed down. The surface settlements and defensive positions that had been maintained vigilantly after the first wave had been gradually allowed to deteriorate as the threat seemed increasingly distant. When the second wave struck, humanity was psychologically and materially unprepared for the onslaught. The second wave ARCs showed capabilities that suggested whoever or whatever was producing them had been learning from the first wave engagement. They targeted communication networks to isolate communities. They struck at food production and water supplies to create resource pressure. They seemed to understand human psychology, attacking in ways calculated to create maximum terror and disruption. Some of the new machine types were clearly designed as counters to specific human tactics that had worked against first-wave units. The Hornets that could stun raiders into helplessness, the Rocketeers that could destroy defensive positions with devastating missile strikes, the Bastions with their relentless firepower. Each seemed tailored to negate human advantages. Faced with this overwhelming assault, humanity made the only choice that seemed likely to ensure survival. They abandoned the surface permanently and retreated into the underground cities and tunnel networks. This wasn't a tactical withdrawal or a temporary measure. This was acknowledgement that the surface now belonged to the machines and that human survival depended on accepting life in the darkness below. Communities sealed the entrances to their tunnel networks. Surface settlements were evacuated and abandoned. The sunrise period was over, and what came after was life in permanent twilight. This retreat fundamentally changed human psychology and society. Surface expeditions, which had been routine during the interwave period, became high-risk ventures that only the desperate or foolhardy would attempt. The term raider took on new meaning, referring specifically to those specialists who were crazy or brave enough to venture topside to gather necessary supplies. Life underground became the new normal, and an entire generation grew up never seeing direct sunlight, breathing recycled air, living in cramped tunnels carved from the bones of the dead world. The second wave also never stopped, at least not in the way the first wave had. By the current timeline of the game, set in 2180, the machines continue to fall from the sky in a constant stream. Some seem to be reinforcements for existing machines. Others appear to be entirely new types, more advanced models being tested in the field. The ARC presence on the surface has evolved into a complete occupation, with different machine types fulfilling different roles in what seems like an organized campaign to either exterminate humanity or harvest the planet's resources for unknown purposes. Current survivors understand that the situation is fundamentally different from the first wave. That was a battle that could be won. This is an occupation that can only be survived. The best humanity can hope for is to endure, to maintain their underground strongholds, and to prevent the machines from discovering and destroying the tunnel networks that are now the last refuges of human civilization. Every expedition topside is a risk not just to the raiders involved, but potentially to the entire community if they're followed back to the tunnel entrances. This is the world players enter when they begin ARC Raiders, the timeline where humanity has been pushed to the absolute edge of extinction, and survival depends on the courage and skill of raiders willing to face death to gather the supplies that keep the underground communities alive. It's 2180, and this is what's left of human civilization. To understand the current struggle, we need to examine the setting itself, the physical locations where this desperate fight for survival plays out. The region known as the Rust Belt represents what remains of a once thriving area in southern Italy, now transformed into a rust-stained graveyard where the past confronts an uncertain future. The Rust Belt gets its name from the omnipresent decay that defines the landscape. Rusting metal is everywhere, from the shells of first and second wave ARC machines to the corroding remains of pre-collapse infrastructure. The moisture in the air, whether from the Mediterranean coastline or the swamps that have formed in low-lying areas, accelerates the deterioration of metal, creating the characteristic red-brown patina that coats everything. It's a visual shorthand for a world that's rotting, where entropy has won and even the most robust human creations are slowly crumbling back into the earth. The geography of the Rust Belt points clearly to southern Italy, specifically the region around Assera and the Campania area. Mount Vesuvius is visible on the horizon, though the game refers to it as Volcano Rise, a clear landmark that helps orient the setting. The volcanic activity that helped cause the collapse has left its mark everywhere you look. Volcanic rock is scattered across many areas, particularly around the dam battlegrounds. The landscape shows evidence of massive pyroclastic flows and ash deposits that reshape the terrain. The coastline has changed dramatically due to rising sea levels, with many pre-collapse coastal areas now submerged or transformed into swampland. The Italian influence permeates every aspect of the setting in ways both obvious and subtle. Weapon names draw from Italian vocabulary. Pistols are called Berletta, rifles are named Ferro and Torrente, reflecting the language of this region. The architecture in the buried city and other locations shows distinctly Italian characteristics, the kind of building styles you'd find in traditional Mediterranean settlements. Even small details like the Pizzeria Petrarca mentioned in the tutorial, which references an actual pizza restaurant north of Bologna, ground the setting in this specific geographic and cultural context. The name Speranza itself means hope in Italian, a deliberate choice that underscores the community's determination to survive and maintain optimism even in the darkest circumstances. Toledo, the larger city of which Speranza is a district, also carries Italian naming conventions. These linguistic choices aren't just flavor, they're part of how the game builds its world, rooting the post-apocalyptic struggle in the remnants of a specific culture and place. The changes wrought by the environmental collapse transformed familiar geography into something alien. Areas that were once vibrant agricultural regions turned into deserts, which explains the sand dunes that have buried entire cities. The Mediterranean climate that once made this region so habitable became chaotic and unpredictable. Forests grew in unexpected places, while traditional forested areas died off. Swampland developed where none had existed before, as water drainage systems failed and low-lying areas flooded. The result is a landscape that feels simultaneously familiar and deeply wrong, recognizable as Earth but transformed into something hostile and strange. The Rust Belt isn't a uniformly hostile wasteland. Different regions within it have distinct characteristics and challenges. These variations create the diverse environments players explore, each with its own history, threats, and opportunities. Understanding these different battlegrounds is crucial to understanding how the remnants of humanity continue their desperate struggle. The underground city of Toledo represents humanity's main surviving population center in the Rust Belt. Understanding its structure and nature is crucial to understanding how post-collapse human society functions. Toledo isn't a planned city built from scratch. It's a patchwork of desperation, a collection of tunnel networks, sunken buildings, reinforced bunkers, and natural cave systems that have been connected and expanded over generations into something approaching urban infrastructure. The city is divided into independent districts called contradas, a term borrowed from Italian tradition. Each contrada operates with significant autonomy, managing its own internal affairs, maintaining its own resources, making its own decisions about who to admit and how to govern. Some infrastructure is shared, the tubes that connect different areas, certain critical facilities like water treatment, defensive positions at tunnel entrances. But for the most part, each contrada looks after its own, and relationships between districts can range from cooperative trading partnerships to suspicious isolation to outright hostility. This fragmented structure emerged from Toledo's history of formation. The underground city didn't grow from a single community expanding outward. It formed from multiple separate survivor groups discovering each other's tunnel networks and gradually connecting them. Each group brought its own leadership, culture, and way of doing things, rather than trying to force everyone under a single authority, which would likely have led to conflict and splintering. The contrada system allowed different communities to maintain their identity while still benefiting from being part of a larger network. The tubes are the circulatory system that keeps Toledo alive. These networks of tunnels and passages connect the various contradas, allowing movement and trade while providing protection from the surface. Some tubes are natural cave systems that were expanded and reinforced. Others are pre-collapse infrastructure, subway tunnels, underground roads, utility tunnels that have been repurposed. Still others are post-collapse excavations, carefully dug through rubble and rock to create new connections. The tubes are maintained by various groups, some official, some not, and transit through them isn't always free or safe. Speranza is one of Toledo's contradas, and it's where players make their home. The name means hope in Italian, and that's exactly what this district represents for the people who live there. Speranza was founded by survivors of the first wave, including Celeste, who would become its leader and symbol. These founders had watched communities destroyed by ARC attacks, had experienced the terror of the machines firsthand, and were determined to create a refuge that could endure whatever threats the future might bring. The district is built around the idea of active resistance rather than passive hiding. While Toledo as a whole focuses on survival through concealment and isolation, Speranza cultivates a culture of raiders, specialists who venture topside to gather supplies, intelligence, and technology. This makes Speranza simultaneously one of the most dynamic and most vulnerable contradas. The constant flow of raiders going up and coming back creates an energy and flow of resources that other districts lack. But it also means Speranza is constantly at risk of having its location discovered if a raider is followed back by ARC machines or hostile humans. The physical layout of Speranza reflects its function as a raider hub, workshops where raiders can repair, modify, and upgrade their equipment, vendor stalls where traders sell supplies and purchase salvage, cantinas and social spaces where raiders gather to share information, form teams, and blow off steam between runs. The neon-lit, bustling atmosphere is deliberately maintained as a morale booster, a way to create the feeling of normal life even in the depths beneath a dead world. There are even entertainment options, bars, fight rings, karaoke venues, anything to help people cope with the psychological pressure of their situation. The traders are the most visible authority figures in Speranza, though the district's actual governance structure seems deliberately informal. Each trader specializes in certain types of supplies and equipment, but they're more than just merchants. They're quest givers who send raiders topside on specific missions. They're information brokers who gather intelligence from returning raiders. They're skilled specialists whose expertise helps keep the entire community functioning. Understanding who these individuals are and what drives them gives us crucial insight into Speranza's character and priorities. Life in underground Toledo, and Speranza specifically, is defined by scarcity and constant struggle. Resources that pre-collapse civilization took for granted are now precious commodities that must be carefully managed. Food production is limited to what can be grown in underground hydroponic facilities or scavenged from the surface. Water must be filtered and recycled endlessly. Power comes from salvaged generators running on fuel that raiders risk their lives to obtain. Medical supplies are irreplaceable treasures. Advanced technology is coveted and fought over. This scarcity creates social tensions that the contrada system both alleviates and exacerbates. Within each district, tight-knit communities share resources and support each other. But between districts, competition for the limited supplies flowing into Toledo can create friction. Some contradas hoard what they have, refusing to trade except at exploitative rates. Others pride themselves on cooperation and mutual aid. Speranza's philosophy leans toward the latter, but survival sometimes forces compromises with less principled neighbors. The psychological toll of underground life shouldn't be underestimated. Multiple generations have now been born in the tunnels, never experiencing natural sunlight, never seeing the sky except through hazmat suits during brief, terrifying surface runs. Vitamin D deficiency, seasonal affective disorder, claustrophobia. These are endemic problems. The neon lights and painted murals that decorate Speranza aren't just aesthetic choices, they're psychological necessities, attempts to create visual stimulation and the illusion of more space in the crushing confines of tunnel living. Yet despite everything, human culture persists and even flourishes in these conditions. People form relationships, create art, tell stories, build communities. The cantinas echo with music and laughter. Children are born and raised with hope for their future, even though that future looks increasingly uncertain. This resilience, this refusal to surrender to despair, even when extinction seems inevitable, is what makes humanity worth saving in the first place. The surface of the Rust Belt is where theory meets reality, where the lore becomes tangible in the maps players explore. Each location tells its own story about what was lost, what endures, and what threatens the last remnants of humanity. Let's explore these battlegrounds in detail, understanding not just their tactical characteristics, but their narrative significance. The dam battleground center around the Alcantara power plant, a massive hydroelectric facility that stands as a monument to pre-collapse engineering. This structure survived the environmental catastrophe that destroyed so much else, a testament to the quality of its construction. The dam itself is colossal, stretching across a river valley that's now partly flooded and partly turned into swampland. The generators that once powered entire regions still stand, though they're silent now, or perhaps operated intermittently by groups trying to tap their remaining power output. The area around the dam is incredibly diverse ecologically, creating the varied terrain that defines this battleground. Thick forests cover the hillsides, vegetation that grew up in the decades since the collapse, feeding on the rich volcanic soil deposited by Vesuvius's eruption. These aren't the carefully managed forests of pre-collapse times, but wild tangles of competing species, some native, some invasive, all fighting for space and sunlight. The forest provides cover and resources, but also conceals threats, ARC patrols, hostile raiders, environmental hazards. The swamps that have formed in low-lying areas around the dam present their own challenges. The water is toxic, contaminated by industrial runoff, decomposing biomass, and the residue of decades of warfare. Wading through these swamps is dangerous without proper protection. The mist that rises from the stagnant water obscures vision and carries its own hazards. But the swamps also provide concealment and alternative routes through the terrain, allowing clever raiders to avoid more heavily patrolled areas. Research centers dot the landscape around the dam, pre-collapse facilities that were studying everything from renewable energy to ecological restoration. These buildings are particularly valuable to raiders because they often contain preserved technical documentation, functional equipment, and supplies that were stockpiled before the collapse. However, they're also priority targets for ARC machines, which seem particularly interested in these facilities for reasons that remain mysterious. Are they searching for specific technology? Trying to understand human capabilities? The patterns of ARC behavior around research sites suggest purpose, not random patrol. The dam battlegrounds also contains a memorial to the First Wave conflict, a place where the husks of defeated machines have been gathered and arranged. This isn't just random wreckage. It's a deliberate monument created by survivors, a physical reminder of what was overcome and a warning about what returned. The cruder, bulkier designs of first-wave machines are clearly visible in these corroding hulks, showing how the threat has evolved. Raiders sometimes come here to salvage parts, but it's also a pilgrimage site, a place to remember those who died in humanity's first war against the machines. The strategic importance of the dam made it a focal point during the First Wave and continues to make it contested territory in the current conflict. Whoever controls the dam controls power generation, water flow, and a commanding position over the surrounding region. Multiple factions, different raider groups, occasional AR concentrations, possibly even other human communities, all have interests here. This makes the dam battlegrounds one of the most dangerous but potentially rewarding areas for surface expeditions. The buried city, also called Murano after the pre-collapse settlement it once was, presents a different kind of haunting landscape. This entire urban area has been swallowed by sand, buried under dunes that appeared in the decades following the environmental collapse. The transformation of this region from livable Mediterranean city to desert wasteland speaks to just how drastically the climate has shifted. The sand came from the desertification of what had been agricultural land, from erosion of destabilized hillsides, from the broader chaos of disrupted weather patterns. Walking through the buried city is like excavating an archaeological site from your own recent history. Buildings emerge from the sand at strange angles, half submerged, their windows filled with dust. Streets that once carried traffic are now pathways between dunes, the asphalt cracked and buckled by the weight of accumulated sand. The entire place has the quality of a fever dream, recognizable as a city, but transformed into something alien and dead. The hospital stands as a particularly poignant landmark. This was where people came for healing, where children were born, where the sick and injured were cared for. Now it's a tomb, its corridors choked with sand, its equipment corroded beyond use, its rooms filled with the mummified remains of those who died when civilization collapsed. Raiders venture into the hospital seeking medical supplies, which are incredibly valuable, but it's grim work, searching through the dead past for tools to survive the dying present. The shopping mall represents consumer culture frozen at its moment of death. Store displays still show pre-collapse fashion, now faded and dust-covered. Food courts offer meals no one will ever order. The whole structure is a time capsule of ordinary life. People were shopping here, going about their daily routines when the collapse began. Now it's a maze of partially buried corridors and chambers where raiders search for anything useful that might have survived. Clothing, electronics, tools, even preserved food if you're lucky and careful about checking expiration dates and radiation levels. Residential apartment buildings provide the most intimate glimpse into pre-collapse life. Personal belongings still sit where they were left when the occupants fled or died. Photographs on walls, toys in children's rooms, dishes and sinks. These aren't historical artifacts from some distant past. These are the immediate ancestors of current survivors, the lives that were lost just generations ago. For raiders from underground communities who've never experienced normal surface living, these apartments reveal what was lost, the casual comfort and security that defined pre-collapse existence. The sand itself presents constant challenges, It shifts with the wind, uncovering new areas while burying others. Dunes can collapse unexpectedly, revealing hidden chambers or trapping unwary raiders. The sand gets into everything: equipment, weapons, protective gear, requiring constant maintenance. Vision is often limited by blowing dust. The fine particles are abrasive and can damage sensitive electronics. Yet the sand also provides concealment, allowing raiders to hide from ARC patrols or dig in when necessary. ARC presence in the buried city follows distinct patterns. Certain machines seem designed for operation in sandy conditions, their joints sealed against particle intrusion, their sensors adapted to low visibility. They patrol methodically through the half-buried streets, searching for human activity. The tactics that work in forests or open ground often fail in the unique terrain of the buried city, requiring raiders to adapt their approach to the environment. The Assera spaceport represents humanity's greatest achievement and greatest betrayal made manifest in concrete and steel. This facility, more than anywhere else in the Rust Belt, tells the story of the exodus and the class division that defined the collapse's final days. The sheer scale of the spaceport is staggering. These aren't simple launch pads, but massive industrial complexes designed to construct and launch interstellar vessels. The launch towers dominate the skyline, visible from miles away. These colossal structures served multiple purposes: assembly points where rocket stages were integrated, launch platforms from which vessels departed, and support towers containing fuel lines, control systems, and access points for crew and cargo. The engineering required to build these towers represented peak pre-collapse capabilities. They had to support tremendous weight, withstand the violent forces of rocket launches, and provide precise control over incredibly complex operations. The rocket assembly buildings are perhaps even more impressive than the towers themselves. These enclosed structures were where the Exodus vessels were actually built, massive construction bays where teams of engineers and technicians assembled components into functional spacecraft. The clean rooms where sensitive electronics were installed, the testing facilities where systems were verified, the secure storage areas where critical supplies were stockpiled for loading. Walking through these buildings today, raiders can still see evidence of the frantic final days before the exodus: abandoned workstations, half-finished assemblies, documentation scattered everywhere. The control towers from which launches were coordinated contain some of the most advanced preserved technology in the entire Rust Belt. The computer systems here were state-of-the-art even by pre-collapse standards, capable of monitoring thousands of data points and making split-second adjustments to launch parameters. Much of this equipment is still functional, or could be with proper expertise in parts, making the control towers extremely valuable to scavengers. However, ARC machines seem to recognize this value too, and these areas are often heavily patrolled. The departure and arrival buildings processed the people who were leaving Earth forever. Security checkpoints where identities were verified and tickets confirmed. Waiting areas where the chosen few spent their final hours on Earth. Viewing galleries where they could look out at the rockets that would carry them away. The graffiti covering these walls tells the story of those who weren't chosen, messages of rage and despair and accusation. Make room for all isn't a request, it's an indictment. Only the rich leave isn't news. It's an epitaph for equality. The emotional weight of the spaceport goes beyond its physical characteristics. This is where humanity's social contract was definitively broken, where those with power chose themselves over everyone else. For raiders from underground communities descended from those who were abandoned, visiting the spaceport is a pilgrimage to a site of ancestral betrayal. Some come seeking valuable technology. Others come to bear witness, to connect with the history that shaped their current desperate circumstances. The place resonates with meaning that goes far beyond tactical considerations. The spaceport also raises troubling questions about the current timeline. If the Exodus survivors did make it to another system and establish themselves there, would they return? Could they return? And if they did, would they come to rescue the descendants of those they abandoned or for some other purpose? The advanced technology in second-wave ARC machines, its suspicious compatibility with human engineering, suggests possibilities that many prefer not to contemplate. Bluegate represents a completely different, environment from the other major battlegrounds, a mountainous region where pre-collapse settlements clung to steep hillsides and narrow valleys. The name comes from a distinctive landmark, a pass between peaks that's marked by blue-painted structures, possibly religious sites or waypoints. This area shows less obvious devastation than locations that were hit by direct environmental catastrophes, but it's no less dangerous. The mountain towns that dot Bluegate's landscape were built for a climate that no longer exists. Many are now subjected to harsh weather, freezing temperatures, violent storms, conditions that make surface survival incredibly challenging even without ARC threats. Buildings that were designed for Mediterranean weather have been battered by decades of conditions they were never meant to withstand. Roofs have collapsed under snow loads, walls have cracked from repeated freeze-thaw cycles, entire structures have slid down hillsides, destabilized by earthquakes and erosion. The underground complexes in Bluegate are particularly extensive, possibly because the rocky terrain made tunnel excavation easier than in other regions, or because the mountain communities had a tradition of underground construction for wine cellars, storage, and protection from historical threats. These tunnel networks potentially connect to Toledo's larger system, making Bluegate strategically important. If the tubes reach here, it provides an alternate access point to the surface for the underground city, valuable for trading and raiding expeditions. The terrain itself is tactically challenging. Steep slopes limit movement options. Narrow passes become choke points, where small numbers can hold off larger forces, but also where escape becomes impossible if you're cornered. The altitude affects visibility and weather in unpredictable ways, with fog and storms rolling in suddenly. ARC machines operating in Bluegate seem adapted to these conditions, showing enhanced stability on uneven terrain and improved sensor capabilities for low-visibility environments. Stella Montis stands apart from the other locations both geographically and narratively. This research facility, built into a mountainside in a remote area, was dedicated to some kind of preservation project before the collapse. The nature of this project is deliberately mysterious, but environmental storytelling and scattered documentation suggest it involved preserving samples of Earth's ecosystem, possibly as a hedge against the environmental collapse that scientists knew was coming. The facility has a two-layer structure that's unique in the Rust Belt, an upper level built into the mountain face, featuring laboratories, storage areas, and administrative spaces. Below that, accessed through secure elevators and stairwells, a lower level that's dug deeper into the rock, containing the actual preservation vaults, climate-controlled chambers, and the most sensitive research areas. This layered design speaks to paranoia about security and environmental protection, the most critical materials kept in the most protected location. The environment around Stella Montis is cold and harsh. The facility is at high altitude where snow is common. This creates unique challenges for raiders attempting to reach it. The cold drains energy and damages equipment. Visibility is often limited by snowfall or blizzard conditions. The approach routes are limited and potentially monitored. Yet the potential rewards justify the risks. Stella Montis likely contains preserved genetic material, pre-collapse research data, advanced scientific equipment, everything needed to potentially restart civilization properly rather than just surviving in its ruins. The facility's state of preservation varies by area. Some sections remain sealed and climate-controlled, protected by robust systems that have continued functioning for decades. These areas contain treasures that are pristine and immediately usable. Other sections have been breached, whether by time, environmental damage, or ARC intrusion, and their contents have deteriorated. The most valuable materials are in the deepest, most protected areas, which means raiders must penetrate through multiple security layers and potentially face whatever ARC forces have taken an interest in the facility. The fact that ARC machines show particular interest in Stella Montis is deeply troubling to those aware of the pattern. Why would autonomous robots care about a biological research facility? What use would they have for genetic samples or ecosystem data? The possibilities range from mundane, they're simply cataloging everything, to deeply unsettling. Someone or something is using the ARCs to gather specific information or materials for purposes humanity hasn't figured out yet. Each of these locations is more than just a tactical environment. They're chapters in the story of how humanity fell and how it struggles to survive. The dam represents strategic resources and remembrance of past victories. The buried city shows ordinary life frozen and buried. The spaceport embodies both humanity's greatest capabilities and most profound moral failures. Bluegate offers harsh beauty and hidden connections. Stella Montis holds secrets that might be crucial to understanding not just the past, but the future. Raiders who venture to these places aren't just looting, they're excavating their own history, trying to understand what was lost so they can figure out how to move forward. The environmental storytelling throughout these locations is rich with detail. Graffiti that reveals the emotions and thoughts of those who came before. Skeletons positioned in ways that tell stories about how they died. Locked safes and blocked doorways that hint at desperate last stands. Functioning equipment that shouldn't still work but does because it was built to last. Photographs and personal effects that humanize the catastrophe. All of it combines to create a world that feels lived in and died in, where every corner potentially holds both treasure and tragedy. Weather and dynamic events add another layer to surface exploration. Sandstorms in the buried city that reduce visibility to near zero, but also mask raiders from ARC sensors. Fog rolling through the dam battlegrounds that creates opportunities for stealth, electrical storms that temporarily disable some ARC systems, but also endanger raiders in open areas. These dynamic conditions mean that the surface is never static, never fully predictable, always dangerous in new ways. Now that we understand where humanity fights for survival, we need to understand what they're fighting against. The ARC machines are the existential threat that defines the current era, mysterious, deadly, and seemingly unstoppable. But they're not a monolithic force. They're a diverse array of specialized units that fulfill different roles, and understanding them is crucial to survival. The term ARC itself is contested. Depending on who you ask, it stands for Autonomous Robotic Constructs, Autonomous Recon Combatants, or other variations. The uncertainty about even the name reflects humanity's limited understanding of these machines. What's clear is that they're autonomous, operating without obvious central control, robotic rather than biological, and purpose-built for specific functions. They arrived from space, both during the first wave and continuing through the second wave, suggesting they're being produced elsewhere and deployed to Earth for reasons that remain mysterious. The fundamental mystery of the ARC machines is their origin. No human faction has claimed responsibility for creating them. The technology shows characteristics that suggest human design principles, the basic physics of how they move and function, the types of sensors they use, even aesthetic choices in their construction all suggest human engineering. But the capabilities exceed anything known to have existed before the collapse, and the deployment method, dropping from orbit in what seem like purpose-built entry pods, implies industrial capacity and organization far beyond what struggling surface communities could achieve. This leads to three main theories, each with unsettling implications. The first is that the ARC machines were created by pre-collapse military or research programs, possibly as autonomous defense systems or peacekeeping forces that went rogue when civilization collapsed. This would explain the human-compatible technology and the presence on Earth, but it doesn't explain the orbital deployment or the decades-long gap between waves. The second theory is that they're extraterrestrial in origin, created by non-human intelligence for purposes humanity can't comprehend. This would explain why they seem alien despite using familiar principles, but it doesn't account for the distinctly human engineering characteristics. The third and most disturbing theory is that the ARC machines were created by the Exodus survivors, that humanity's elite who fled to the stars are now sending machines back to Earth for resource extraction, terraforming, elimination of remaining population, or other goals that don't align with surface humanity's survival. Each theory has evidence for and against it, and the game deliberately maintains ambiguity about which is correct. What matters for raiders is not the philosophical question of origin, but the practical reality of behavior and vulnerabilities. ARC machines follow consistent patterns that can be learned and exploited. They have specific weak points that can be targeted. They operate in different alert states that change their aggression and capabilities. Understanding these patterns means the difference between successful raids and becoming scrap metal yourself. ARC machines operate in 3 alert states, indicated by lights and behavioral changes. Blue state represents passive monitoring. The machine is aware of its surroundings, but hasn't detected threats. ARCs in blue state follow patrol patterns, investigate points of interest, and generally act like security forces maintaining an area. Raiders can sometimes pass through areas with blue state ARCs if they're careful about line of sight and noise management. Yellow state indicates heightened awareness. The machine has detected something suspicious and is actively investigating. This might be triggered by seeing a raider at distance, hearing gunfire, or finding evidence of human activity. Yellow state ARCs are dangerous because they're looking for targets, but can sometimes still be evaded. Red state means combat engagement. The machine has identified a threat and is actively attacking. Red state ARCs use their full capabilities and will pursue targets aggressively. Understanding these states and what triggers transitions between them is crucial tactical knowledge. Some raiders specialize in stealth approaches that avoid triggering yellow or red states. Others focus on overwhelming firepower to quickly destroy ARCs before they can effectively respond. The machines also seem to communicate with each other in ways that aren't fully understood, alerting nearby units to threats, which means that engaging one ARC often means facing several. The variety of ARC types is extensive, with each designed for specific roles in what seems like a coordinated force structure. Let's examine the different categories and specific models, understanding both their capabilities and their vulnerabilities. The smallest ARC units are often the most numerous and serve as scouts and light attack forces. Ticks are tiny spider-like machines that scuttle across terrain with disturbing speed. They're not individually dangerous, their attacks are weak and their armor is minimal, but they're almost never alone. Ticks swarm, overwhelming targets through sheer numbers. They can crawl on walls and ceilings, dropping on unsuspecting raiders from above. Their small size makes them hard to hit, especially in groups. The best defense against tick swarms is area effect weapons or rapid-fire guns that can take out multiple targets quickly. Pops are slightly larger, bipedal units that look almost comically unthreatening until they start shooting. They move in a distinctive hopping gait that gives them their name. Pops typically carry basic ballistic weapons and work in groups, using suppressing fire and flanking tactics that suggest either sophisticated programming or remote control. They're more fragile than larger units, but dangerous in numbers. Raiders learn to prioritize pops when they appear with more dangerous machines, eliminating the lighter units quickly before focusing on bigger threats. Surveyors represent the ARC reconnaissance capability. These machines are designed for information gathering rather than combat, featuring advanced sensor arrays and high mobility. They often appear before larger ARC forces, mapping terrain and identifying targets. Smart raiders try to destroy surveyors before they can report back, though whether this actually prevents reinforcements or just triggers them faster is debated. Surveyors are lightly armed and relatively fragile, making them priority targets when detected. Snitches are flying reconnaissance drones that patrol areas from above. They're small, fast, and difficult to hit, but they're also not particularly durable once you land shots. The danger of snitches is their ability to alert other ARC units to raider presence from angles that are hard to predict or control. Many successful raids have been compromised by a snitch that spotted movement and called in reinforcements. Some raiders carry specialized anti-air weapons specifically for dealing with flying scouts. The flying combat units represent a severe threat category because they attack from angles that most raiders aren't well equipped to defend against. Wasps are the most common flying attackers, agile machines that strafe raiders with energy weapons. They're fast enough to be difficult targets, and they circle constantly, making them hard to track. The distinctive buzzing sound they make has become associated with immediate danger in raider consciousness. Wasps typically attack in pairs or small groups, coordinating their attacks to keep targets suppressed and off balance. Hornets are more dangerous than wasps, sacrificing some speed for enhanced weaponry. Most notably, hornets can deploy stunning electrical attacks that temporarily disable raiders, leaving them helpless for crucial seconds. A hornet's stun attack sounds like crackling electricity and is often preceded by the machine positioning itself directly overhead. Raiders caught by hornet stuns are vulnerable to follow-up attacks from ground units, making these flying machines priority threats in any mixed engagement. Rocketeers represent the flying artillery, machines designed to destroy defensive positions and fortified targets. They fire explosive missiles that can devastate raiders caught in the blast radius. The missile launch is distinctive, a whistling sound, followed by an explosion that can kill even armored targets if it hits directly. Rocketeers typically hover at medium range, making them vulnerable to focused fire if raiders can spare the attention. But in the chaos of multi-unit engagements, Rocketeers often get free shots that turn battles decisively against human forces. Ground combat units form the backbone of ARC forces encountered during surface raids. Fireballs are wheeled machines that move with surprising speed across open ground. They're armed with rapid-fire weapons and have decent armor, making them straightforward but dangerous opponents. Fireballs often serve as the primary assault force in ARC attacks, rolling in quickly to engage raiders while more specialized units provide support. Their wheel design means they struggle with rough terrain, something observant raiders exploit by fighting in areas where fireballs can't easily maneuver. Turrets are stationary or slow-moving defensive units that deploy heavy weapons with devastating effect. When a turret sets up in a position, it creates a kill zone that's extremely dangerous to cross. The machine's bulk and armor make it difficult to destroy quickly, and its weapons are powerful enough to shred raiders in seconds. The key to dealing with turrets is either avoiding their fields of fire, destroying them before they can deploy, or using long-range weapons to take them out from safety. Some turrets also have shield generators that must be disabled before the main body can be damaged. Lepers are exactly what their name suggests, machines that use powerful hydraulic legs to jump great distances. This gives them mobility that wheeled or walking units lack, allowing them to cross obstacles and close distance with raiders in unexpected ways. A leaper can be on one side of a collapsed building and on top of you seconds later, having bounded over the intervening terrain in a few massive leaps. They're typically equipped with close-range weapons and armored heavily enough to survive the landing impacts. Fighting leapers requires constant awareness of vertical space and the willingness to reposition frequently. The heavy combat units represent serious threats that typically require team efforts to overcome. Bastions are massive, heavily armed machines that serve as mobile fortresses. They're covered in thick armor plating that resists all but the most powerful weapons or concentrated fire. Bastions carry multiple weapon systems, usually combinations of rapid-fire guns, explosives, and energy weapons. They move slowly but relentlessly, and once they lock onto targets, they're incredibly difficult to escape. Most raider casualties come from underestimating bastions or trying to engage them without proper preparation. The key to survival is identifying weak points in the armor, typically joints and sensor arrays, and focusing fire on those vulnerable areas while maintaining distance. Bombardiers represent the ARC artillery capability, machines designed to rain destruction from safe distances. A bombardier fires explosive projectiles in arcing trajectories, allowing it to hit targets behind cover or in defensive positions. These machines often work in coordination with spotters, smaller units that identify targets and provide targeting data. The bombardier-spotter combination is particularly dangerous because it allows the artillery unit to engage raiders it can't even see directly. Dealing with this combination requires either eliminating the spotter to blind the bombardier or flanking around to engage the artillery unit directly before it can reposition. The boss-level ARC machines are creatures of legend and nightmare in raider culture, massive constructs that require coordinated team efforts and serious firepower to overcome. The Queen is a towering machine bristling with weapons and protected by armor that can withstand tremendous punishment. Queens typically command areas and coordinate other ARC units, acting as field commanders for machine forces. They demonstrate tactical behavior far more sophisticated than smaller units, adapting to raider strategies and exploiting weaknesses with disturbing intelligence. Taking down a queen is a major achievement that yields exceptional salvage. but also attracts attention from other ARC forces that respond to the destruction of command units. The matriarch represents an even more formidable threat, a mobile factory that can produce smaller ARC units on the fly. Destroying a matriarch is crucial because leaving one operational means facing endless waves of reinforcements as it spawns new machines. The matriarch itself is heavily defended and surrounded by constantly refreshing defender units. Raids against matriarchs require either overwhelming force applied quickly before it can produce too many defenders, or sustained pressure that destroys spawned units faster than they can be replaced while wearing down the matriarch's defenses. The Shredder is perhaps the most feared ARC variant, a machine specifically designed for close-quarters devastation. Its name comes from the rotating blade systems and rapid-fire weapons that can reduce raiders to ribbons in seconds. Shredders are fast, aggressive, and relentless once they identify targets. They don't just attack, they hunt, pursuing raiders through complex terrain and adapting to evasion attempts. The sound of a Shredder's approach, the whine of its blade system spinning up, the mechanical thunder of its movement, has become a harbinger of death that sends experienced raiders looking for escape routes. Beyond the combat units, ARC forces include specialized machines focused on resource gathering and area control. Probes are scanning devices that survey terrain and investigate areas of interest. They're not particularly dangerous individually, but their presence suggests that ARC forces are searching for something specific. What that something might be, human populations, valuable technology, specific materials, remains unclear. Probes are often protected by combat units that respond aggressively to any threats against the scanning machines. Harvesters are massive machines designed to extract resources from the environment. They strip mine areas, collect materials, and process them into refined forms that are somehow transported away, presumably back to wherever the ARC machines are being produced. The implications of harvesters are troubling. They suggest the ARC presence isn't just about destroying humanity, but about systematically exploiting Earth's resources. This resource extraction might be preparation for terraforming, support for off-world industry, or some purpose humans haven't figured out. What's certain is that harvesters leave devastation in their wake, entire regions stripped bare of anything useful. All ARC machines show certain common characteristics that reveal details about their construction and capabilities. The technology is sophisticated but not magical. The machines operate on principles of mechanics, electronics, and computing that are recognizable as advanced versions of human engineering. They use power sources that appear to be compact fusion or similar high-density energy systems, explaining their endurance and weapon capabilities. Their sensors operate across multiple spectrums: visual, thermal, electromagnetic, making stealth challenging but not impossible. Their communications appear to be wireless networks of some kind, though attempts to hack or jam these systems have had limited success. One of the most troubling characteristics of ARC machines is their apparent ability to learn and adapt. Units that encounter specific raider tactics seem to develop countermeasures, not immediately but over time. Strategies that work initially become less effective as the machines adjust. This suggests either individual learning by sophisticated AI systems, centralized learning with updates distributed to all units, or remote operators observing and adjusting machine behavior. Each possibility has different implications for what humanity is really facing. The machines also seem to self-replicate, or at least self-repair to some degree. Damaged ARC units are sometimes observed being repaired by other machines rather than simply abandoned. The matriarch's ability to produce new units in the field extends this capability to actual construction. This self-sustaining quality makes the ARC presence extremely difficult to reduce through attrition. Every machine destroyed is potentially replaced, while human casualties are permanent losses to communities that can't easily replenish their numbers. ARC armor and components are valuable salvage for raiders because they are made from advanced materials that are superior to anything current human industry can produce. This stuff is lightweight, incredibly strong, and resistant to both kinetic and energy damage. Raiders who can successfully strip armor from destroyed machines and adapt it to their own equipment gain significant advantages. The same applies to ARC weapons, though making captured machine guns work for human users requires significant modification and understanding of how the power systems function. The weak points that raiders exploit in ARC machines aren't design flaws so much as necessary compromises. Joints need to move, so they can't be as heavily armored as body panels. Sensors need clear lines of sight, so they're exposed to damage. Cooling systems for power plants and weapons require vents that create vulnerability. Skilled raiders learn to identify these weak points quickly and exploit them ruthlessly, targeting specific components to disable machines rather than trying to destroy them through brute force damage to armored sections. Different ARC types require different tactical approaches, and experienced raiders develop specializations based on which machines they're most effective against. Some focus on anti-air capabilities, carrying weapons optimized for hitting fast-moving flying targets. Others specialize in heavy armor penetration, using powerful rifles or explosives designed to crack bastion armor. Versatility is valuable, but specialists who've mastered specific ARC types are incredibly valuable team members. The psychology of fighting ARC machines is distinct from fighting human opponents. Machines don't feel fear, don't get tired, don't make mistakes born of emotion or stress. They process inputs and execute programmed responses with mechanical precision. This makes them predictable in some ways, but also means they never hesitate, never second guess, never show mercy. Raiders develop a mindset of treating ARC engagements as pure problem solving, identify the threat, determine the optimal response, execute efficiently. Emotional responses like anger or panic get people killed when fighting machines. Yet there's also something deeply disturbing about the machines that goes beyond their lethality. They're not alive, but they move with purpose. They're not intelligent in any human sense, but they demonstrate behavior that mimics intelligence. They're tools, weapons deployed by someone or something, but tools that have killed countless humans and show no signs of stopping. The existential dread of facing an enemy that can't be reasoned with, can't be appealed to, can't be anything other than what it is, weighs heavily on raiders who survive long enough to think about what they're really up against. Understanding the machines also means understanding that humanity is overmatched in nearly every category that matters. Production capacity, the machines can replace losses while humans cannot. Technology, ARC equipment is superior to human gear. Coordination, the machines work together seamlessly while human groups often struggle with conflicting agendas. Sustainability, machines don't need food, water, or psychological support. The only advantages humans have are adaptability, the ability to innovate and try unexpected approaches, and desperation, the willingness to take risks that no sane calculation would justify. These thin advantages are all that stand between survival and extinction. Now, let's turn our attention to the humans who venture topside to face these machines, the raiders themselves. Understanding who these people are, what drives them, and how they function provides crucial context for the game's narrative and mechanics. Raiders aren't a unified organization or military force. They're individuals and small teams who've chosen the dangerous path of surface scavenging as their contribution to underground community survival. Some do it for the material rewards. The salvage and equipment they bring back can be traded for food, medicine, shelter, everything needed for comfortable underground living. Some do it for the status and respect that comes from being one of the crazy ones, brave enough to face the surface. Some do it because they're adrenaline junkies who can't stand the suffocating safety of tunnel life. Some do it because they genuinely believe their actions matter, that every supply run slightly increases humanity's chances of long-term survival. The life cycle of a raider follows a consistent pattern that's reflected in the game's structure. You prepare in the relative safety of Speranza, checking equipment, gathering intelligence from traders about current surface conditions and valuable locations, forming teams if you're not going solo. Then, you ascend through the tubes to reach surface access points, sealed hatches and tunnels that open onto the dead world above. This transition from the cramped but secure underground to the open but hostile surface is psychologically significant. Every raider experiences the moment where they step from safety into danger. On the surface, the real work begins. You navigate to target locations, searching for specific items or just generally scavenging anything useful. You engage or avoid ARC machines depending on your goals and capabilities. You potentially encounter other raiders, some friendly, some neutral, some actively hostile. The PvP-PvE structure reflects the reality that you're not the only one trying to survive, and resources are scarce enough that competition is inevitable. Every decision about what to take, what to leave, when to fight, when to run, these choices determine whether you return home or become another corpse decorating the Rust Belt. The extraction phase is often the most dangerous part of any run. You're loaded down with loot, making you slower and potentially noisier. You've been on the surface long enough that ARC patrol patterns may have shifted, or new machines may have dropped from orbit. Other raiders might have been watching, waiting for you to collect valuable salvage before jumping you to steal it. The race back to extraction points creates intense pressure. You need to move fast but can't afford to be reckless, because one mistake can cost everything you've risked your life to gather. Successfully extracting means returning to Speranza with your haul, selling what you don't need, upgrading your equipment, and preparing for the next run. This creates the fundamental gameplay loop that also serves as the narrative heartbeat of raider existence. Risk and reward, danger and safety, surface and underground, repeated endlessly in the desperate hope that each run brings humanity one step closer to something better than simple survival. The skills that successful raiders develop go far beyond simple shooting ability. Navigation is crucial, knowing the routes through dangerous territory, understanding which areas are likely to have valuable loot versus which are picked clean, recognizing landmarks in a landscape that's constantly being reshaped by storms and machine activity. Stealth and tactical awareness mean the difference between avoiding unnecessary fights and stumbling into engagements you can't win. Technical knowledge about what items are valuable, how to quickly assess whether pre-collapse equipment is functional, which AR components are worth the wait and which aren't. All of this separates professional raiders from amateurs who don't survive long. The progression systems that raiders follow reflect the accumulation of this knowledge and equipment. You start with basic gear and limited understanding, barely capable of surviving simple surface runs. Over time, you acquire better weapons, more protective armor, specialized tools that expand your capabilities. You learn the terrain, discover valuable locations, develop strategies that work consistently. You build reputation with the traders, gaining access to better equipment and more lucrative contracts. This progression isn't just about numbers going up, it represents your character becoming genuinely more capable and knowledgeable about surviving in this hostile world. The social dynamics among raiders add complexity to what could otherwise be a simple survival scenario. Competition for valuable salvage creates natural conflict, but so does the fact that successful raiders hoard advantages while others struggle. Some raiders form stable teams that work together regularly, developing trust and coordination that makes them more effective than solo operators. Others remain fiercely independent, unwilling to share rewards or rely on others who might betray them at crucial moments. Still others are opportunistic, forming alliances when convenient and breaking them when profitable. This competitive dynamic is reflected in the game's PvP-PvE structure, which is itself a lore element. Raiders aren't united against the machines. They're individual actors pursuing their own survival and advancement, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing, sometimes actively fighting. This is grimly realistic given the resource scarcity and high stakes. When there's one advanced weapon in a ruined armory and 3 raiders want it, combat becomes inevitable. When extraction points are limited and time is running out, other raiders become obstacles to your survival. Yet there's also an underlying solidarity among those who face the surface. Even raiders who compete brutally for salvage will sometimes band together against major ARC threats or when facing external threats to Speranza. There's recognition that everyone who goes topside is taking their life in their hands, that they're all on the same side in the larger struggle even if they're rivals in the moment. This creates a complex culture where respect is earned through survival and capability, where reputation matters enormously, and where the line between ally and enemy can shift rapidly based on circumstances. The moral complexity of raiding shouldn't be overlooked. These are people who strip mine the graves of their ancestors, looting the dead past for anything that might help the dying present. They compete with each other, sometimes violently, for resources that could save lives back in Speranza. They make constant choices about risk and reward that essentially amount to gambling with their lives and the lives of teammates. Some raiders maintain strong ethical codes, refusing to betray allies or attack unprovoked. Others are pure pragmatists who do whatever it takes to survive. Most exist somewhere in the messy middle, trying to be decent people while making compromises that survival demands. The psychological toll of raiding is immense, even for those who survive physically intact. Constant exposure to danger creates stress responses that accumulate over time. Witnessing teammates die in horrible ways leaves trauma that underground life doesn't provide resources to process effectively. The need to make split-second life or death decisions, often with incomplete information, creates anxiety that doesn't simply disappear when you're back in safety. Many long-term raiders develop the thousand-yard stare of combat veterans, functional on the surface but increasingly disconnected from normal life below. Yet, for all the danger and difficulty, raiders serve an absolutely crucial function in current human society. Without them, the underground communities would slowly die as supplies dwindled and equipment broke down. The medicine, food supplements, technical components, weapons, all the things that make survival possible rather than just slowly dying, come from surface salvage that raiders risk everything to obtain. They're simultaneously the most endangered and most essential members of society, celebrated and envied in equal measure. The traders of Speranza represent the interface between raiders and the broader community, the points where surface salvage turns into underground survival. These aren't just merchants, they're complex individuals with their own histories, motivations, and roles in maintaining hope when extinction looms. Let's examine each of them in detail, understanding what they represent and how they fit into Speranza's desperate society. Celeste is the founder and leader of Speranza, though she'd probably resist formal titles. She survived the first wave, watching communities destroyed and people killed by the initial ARC invasion. She lost her home multiple times, forced to flee as machines advanced and defensive positions collapsed. These experiences could have broken her, turned her bitter and hopeless. Instead, they forged her into someone determined to create a refuge that could endure whatever came next. She founded Speranza with other survivors who shared her vision, a district that wouldn't just hide but would actively resist, sending raiders topside to gather strength for humanity's eventual reclamation of the surface. Celeste's role in Speranza goes beyond administration and logistics. She's a symbol, living proof that someone can survive the worst the machines can throw at you and still choose hope over despair. Raiders look to her for inspiration and guidance. Her belief that humanity can ultimately prevail isn't blind optimism, it's hard-won faith, backed by the knowledge that people have survived impossible situations before and can do so again. She manages the practical needs of keeping the district functioning while also maintaining the morale and shared sense of purpose that prevents Speranza from fragmenting into competing factions. Her interactions with raiders often include encouragement and recognition of their sacrifices. She understands firsthand what they face topside because she faced it herself. This gives her credibility that purely underground leaders lack. When Celeste says a mission matters, raiders believe her. When she promises support, they know she'll deliver. Her leadership style seems to balance pragmatism with empathy, making hard decisions about resource allocation while never losing sight of the human cost of those decisions. The name she chose for the district, Speranza, hope in Italian, reflects her fundamental character. Even after everything she's witnessed and survived, even facing the apparent inevitability of human extinction, she maintains hope. Not hope that some miracle will save everyone, but hope that each day of survival is meaningful, that human dignity and community matter even in the face of annihilation, that the struggle itself has value regardless of whether ultimate victory is possible. Shani serves as Speranza's head of security and ARC specialist, the person responsible for keeping the community safe from external threats. Her reputation for paranoia is well earned and entirely justified. She's suspicious of everyone and everything, constantly planning for worst-case scenarios, refusing to assume safety even in supposedly secure areas. This isn't mental illness or irrational anxiety, it's the logical response of someone who understands exactly how vulnerable underground communities are and how quickly everything can be lost if vigilance lapses. Her expertise on ARC machines is encyclopedic, accumulated through years of studying their behavior, analyzing wreckage, debriefing raiders about encounters, and personally facing machines in combat. Shani knows their capabilities, weak points, patrol patterns, and tactical behaviors better than almost anyone alive. This knowledge makes her invaluable for planning raids, as she can provide detailed intelligence about what machines are likely to be encountered in different areas and how to deal with them. Raiders who ignore her advice usually regret it, assuming they survive to regret anything. Shani's paranoia extends to preparations that many consider excessive, but she considers essential. Multiple evacuation plans for different attack scenarios, hidden caches of supplies and weapons throughout Speranza, redundant security measures at tunnel entrances, constant monitoring of surface conditions through whatever sensors and scout reports are available. She drives some people crazy with her insistence on worst-case planning, but she's also prevented multiple disasters by preparing for things that others thought were impossibly unlikely right up until they happened. Her relationship with other traders and community leaders is complicated by her temperament. Celeste respects Shani's expertise and appreciates the security she provides, even when her precautions seem extreme. Other traders find her intensity exhausting, but acknowledge that someone needs to worry about the things nobody else wants to think about. Raiders generally appreciate that Shani takes their safety seriously, even if they don't always follow her recommendations. The community tolerates her paranoia because deep down, everyone knows she's probably right to be worried. Shani represents the mindset needed for long-term survival in the ARC era. Hope is important, but so is realistic assessment of threats and unwavering commitment to security. She's the counterbalance to Celeste's optimism, the voice reminding everyone that one mistake, one moment of carelessness, could doom the entire community. Her presence ensures that Speranza maintains the vigilance necessary to survive in a world where extinction is one compromised tunnel entrance away. Tianwen is Speranza's reclusive gunsmith, a specialist in weapons and combat equipment who arrived in the district under mysterious circumstances and has never been particularly forthcoming about her past. She keeps to herself, preferring the company of weapons and machinery to people, speaking mainly through her work rather than actual conversation. Yet, despite or perhaps because of her isolation, she's become an essential part of Speranza's survival infrastructure. The weapons she crafts and modifies are some of the finest available, combining salvaged components with her own innovations to create firearms that are reliable, powerful, and adapted to the specific challenges of fighting ARC machines. Her workshop is her domain, a space cluttered with parts, tools, and works in progress that make sense only to her. Raiders who come seeking equipment repairs or custom modifications quickly learn that Tianwen values competence and respect over small talk. She'll work with you if you demonstrate that you know how to handle weapons properly and won't waste her time with stupid questions. Show her that you understand what you're asking for and why, and she'll produce work that exceeds expectations. Approach her with ignorance or arrogance, and you'll be shown the door. The mystery of her background suggests trauma or secrets that she's not ready to share. Did she lose people she cared about? Is she running from something or someone? Does she carry guilt about actions taken during desperate times? The game leaves these questions deliberately unanswered, letting her character be defined more by who she is now than who she was before. What's clear is that her isolation isn't contempt for humanity, but a coping mechanism, a way to manage whatever pain or memories drive her to lose herself in the precise work of gunsmithing. Despite her standoffish demeanor, Tianwen's commitment to supporting raiders reveals a deeper compassion. She puts extraordinary effort into creating weapons that will keep people alive on the surface. She stays up through sleep cycles, perfecting modifications that might make the difference in a critical encounter. She provides equipment at prices that ensure even less wealthy raiders can afford decent gear. Her actions speak to caring that she either can't or won't express through normal social interaction. The community understands this, respecting her boundaries while appreciating what she contributes. Her expertise extends beyond simple gunsmithing into understanding the relationship between weapons and their users. She seems to intuitively grasp what modifications will work for specific raiders based on their combat style and capabilities. She knows which weapons suit which situations and can explain the technical reasons in ways that help raiders make informed choices. This depth of knowledge suggests extensive personal experience with combat, reinforcing the suspicion that her past involved more than just workshop time. Lance presents one of the more intriguing mysteries in Speranza. He's an android, artificial intelligence housed in a synthetic body, trying to find his place in a human community while dealing with amnesia about his own past. The fact that he's medical personnel, a doctor or medic with capabilities that are desperately needed in underground society, makes him valuable despite the unease that some people feel about artificial life. The questions surrounding Lance are multiple and troubling. Where did he come from? Who created him and why? What happened to erase his memories? And most disturbingly, is there any connection between an advanced android suddenly appearing in Speranza and the ARC machines that fall from the sky to kill humans? Lance's situation is difficult on multiple levels. He's trying to contribute to the community by providing medical care, using knowledge and capabilities that seem to be intact, even though his personal memories are gone. But he's constantly aware that many people see him as fundamentally other, not quite trustworthy because he's not human. The connection to ARC machines hangs over every interaction, even though Lance shows no signs of hostile programming or connection to machine forces. He's alone in ways that even solitary humans aren't, the only synthetic intelligence trying to find belonging among organic beings who have every reason to be suspicious. His medical capabilities are extraordinary, combining sophisticated diagnostic equipment with surgical precision and deep knowledge of human physiology. Raiders who return from the surface injured or poisoned receive treatment from Lance that saves lives and limbs that would have been lost without his intervention. This creates cognitive dissonance for those who distrust him. His non-human nature is both the source of their suspicion and the reason he's so effective at keeping them alive. Gradually, through consistent competent care and genuine concern for patients, Lance is building trust and demonstrating that consciousness and compassion aren't limited to biological substrates. The mystery of his amnesia could have multiple explanations, each with different implications for his role in the community. Perhaps he was damaged in whatever event brought him to Speranza, losing memory storage but retaining core skills and personality. Perhaps his memories were deliberately erased to protect information or allow him to start fresh. Perhaps he's a refugee from somewhere, fleeing circumstances he doesn't want to remember. Or perhaps, in the darkest possibility, he's a sleeper agent whose true nature and purpose are hidden even from himself, waiting to be activated. The game presents these possibilities without confirming any, letting Lance exist as a fundamentally uncertain element in Speranza's fabric. His interactions with other traders and raiders reveal someone trying hard to fit in while knowing he never quite will. He makes efforts to understand human culture and social dynamics, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing in ways that would be comedic if they weren't tinged with the sadness of an intelligent being struggling with isolation. He values the connections he manages to form, treasuring friendship and respect, because he knows how easily they could be withdrawn if suspicion overwhelms evidence of his good intentions. Lance represents several thematic concerns central to the game's narrative. The question of what makes someone trustworthy when their nature is fundamentally different from your own. The reality that survival sometimes requires accepting help from sources you don't fully understand or trust. The possibility that humanity and machine consciousness might not be as incompatible as the ARC war suggests, and the tragic situation of an individual caught between two groups, too artificial for humans to fully accept, too peaceful and empathetic for machines to recognize as kin. Apollo is the traveling mechanic and tinkerer, a trader who moves between different communities throughout Toledo rather than staying permanently in Speranza. He specializes in repairing and maintaining the kind of equipment that keeps underground life functioning: generators, air filtration systems, water treatment facilities, communications equipment, all the crucial infrastructure that makes tunnel living possible. His travels give him perspective that more isolated community members lack. He understands how different groups are handling common problems, what innovations are working elsewhere, what threats are emerging in various regions. The fact that Apollo was born topside, before the second wave forced humanity permanently underground, gives him a unique relationship with surface reality. He remembers, however dimly from childhood, what life was like when humans could live above ground without immediate fear of death. This makes him both nostalgic for what was lost and grimly realistic about current circumstances. He's seen the progression from tentative surface life to desperate underground hiding, experiencing firsthand how dramatically human circumstances have deteriorated. His cryptic nature regarding his past suggests experiences that were either traumatic or morally complicated enough that he prefers not to discuss them. What did he do during the initial second wave attacks? How did his family fare? What choices did he make in desperate times that might not reflect well on him now? The game doesn't provide answers, letting Apollo's silence speak to the reality that everyone from his generation carries scars and secrets from the period when civilization collapsed into the tunnels. His focus on practical problems, fixing what's broken, maintaining what still works, might be a way of avoiding deeper reflection on what can't be repaired. Despite his reticence about personal matters, Apollo is gregarious and engaged with community building. He genuinely cares about strengthening connections between different groups, facilitating trade and information sharing, helping people solve problems together rather than in isolation. His traveling lifestyle puts him in position to be a coordinator and diplomat, someone who can broker deals between contradas that don't directly trust each other but will work with Apollo. This role makes him valuable beyond his technical skills, serving as social glue in a fragmented society. His mechanical expertise covers a wide range of systems, reflecting the necessity of being a generalist, when specialization isn't a luxury underground communities can afford. He can coax extra life out of failing equipment, improvise repairs using whatever materials are available, and modify pre-collapse technology to serve new purposes. This jack-of-all-trades quality makes him perpetually busy, always another system breaking down, always another community needing his help. The traveling lifestyle, constantly moving between locations and never settling down, might be as much about avoiding attachment as it is about serving the broader community. Apollo's interactions with raiders tend to be straightforward and practical. He provides equipment maintenance, offers advice about what gear works best for specific situations, and sometimes passes along intelligence he's gathered from other communities about ARC movements or valuable salvage locations. He doesn't lecture or judge, understanding that raiders are doing dangerous necessary work and that his job is to help them do it more effectively. This practical support builds respect and ensures that Apollo is welcome wherever he goes. The 5 traders together create a support structure that allows Speranza to function despite the desperate circumstances. Celeste provides leadership and hope. Shani provides security and tactical intelligence. Tian-Wen provides weapons and equipment. Lance provides medical care. Apollo provides infrastructure maintenance and inter-community connections. Each fills a crucial niche, and the loss of any of them would significantly weaken the district. Their different personalities and approaches also reflect the diversity of responses to crisis, from Celeste's determined optimism to Shani's paranoid vigilance to Tian-Wen's isolated craftsmanship to Lance's struggle for acceptance to Apollo's practical community building. The quests and rewards that traders provide serve both gameplay and narrative functions. They give raiders specific objectives that take them to different locations and create varied experiences. But they also represent the actual needs of the community. Celeste needs intelligence about ARC movements, Shani needs component samples for analysis, Tianwen needs rare materials for weapon construction. Lance needs medical supplies to treat patients. Apollo needs parts to repair critical systems. Each quest is a small story about survival, about doing what must be done to buy another day of existence in the tunnels. Beyond the immediate threats of ARC machines and hostile raiders, the lore of ARC raiders contains deeper mysteries that point toward revelations yet to come. These unresolved questions drive speculation and provide narrative hooks for future content. Understanding what we don't know is as important as understanding what we do. The central mystery remains the true origin of the ARC machines. The three main theories, rogue pre-collapse military technology, extraterrestrial creation, or deployment by Exodus survivors, each have supporting evidence, but none have been definitively confirmed. The game seems to deliberately maintain this ambiguity, letting players draw their own conclusions while leaving room for eventual revelation. The truth, when it emerges, will fundamentally reshape understanding of what's really happening on Earth and what humanity's prospects actually are. The connection to the Exodus survivors is particularly troubling because of the implications if confirmed. If the people who abandoned everyone to die are now sending machines back to finish the job or harvest resources from Earth, it represents betrayal on a scale that's hard to comprehend. It would mean that humanity's elite not only fled, but actively turned against those they left behind. The compatibility between ARC technology and human engineering principles is circumstantial evidence for this theory, but it's not proof. Yet the fact that machines fall from orbit, suggesting off-world production capacity, combined with the knowledge that Exodus survivors had the technology for interstellar travel, creates a connection that's difficult to ignore. If the machines are extraterrestrial, the questions multiply. Why Earth? What do they want? Are they even aware of humans as intelligent beings, or do they simply process us as obstacles to be removed? The precision of ARC operations suggests purpose rather than random exploration or resource gathering. They target human populations and infrastructure specifically, not just any available resources. This implies either detailed knowledge of Earth or the ability to quickly analyze and prioritize targets. Neither possibility is comforting. The rogue AI theory suggests that something humans created escaped control and is now pursuing goals that its creators never intended. This is frightening because it implies fundamental flaws in pre-collapse technology development, safety protocols that failed, fail-safes that didn't work, cascading failures that turned protective systems into exterminators. It also raises questions about whether communication or negotiation might be possible if the machines are fundamentally products of human design rather than alien or human-directed, but created with the specific goal of killing. Stella Montis and the preservation project it housed hint at secrets that might be crucial to understanding the larger situation. What exactly was being preserved there? Just biological samples and genetic material, or something more? The facility's isolation and security suggest it was protecting something valuable enough to justify enormous expense. The ARC interest in the facility implies that whatever is there matters to whoever controls the machines. Could Stella Montis contain the key to understanding what happened, technology that could shift the balance, or information about pre-collapse events that led to the current situation? The environmental purge theory proposes that ARC machines aren't trying to exterminate humanity for resources or malice, but are performing some kind of planetary restoration or cleanup. This theory points to harvester behavior and the systematic way machines process environments. If Earth is being purged of human presence to allow the planet to recover from the collapse, it reframes the conflict from warfare to something more like pest control from the machine's perspective. This doesn't make the threat less deadly, but it changes what victory or survival might mean. You can't negotiate with an exterminator that sees you as the infestation to be removed. The question of what lies beyond the Rust Belt is another major mystery. The game focuses on this specific region of southern Italy, but obviously the second wave is global. What's happening in other parts of the world? Are there other underground communities? Are they facing similar ARC forces or different machine types adapted to different environments? Is communication possible between distant survivor groups? The isolation of Rust Belt communities suggests that long-range communication is difficult or impossible, but there might be other humans out there facing the same struggle, equally alone, equally desperate. The expedition system and voluntary wipe mechanics in the game have interesting lore implications. The concept seems to be that raiders can venture into particularly dangerous areas or undertake high-risk missions that, if they fail, result in character loss but potentially yield exceptional rewards. This reflects the reality that some salvage or intelligence might be valuable enough to justify suicide missions, situations where the potential benefit to the community outweighs the near certainty of personal death. Raiders who volunteer for these expeditions are either heroic or suicidal, depending on your perspective. But they're absolutely necessary for communities trying to gain any advantage they can. The future of humanity's struggle is deliberately unclear. Is survival even possible long-term, or is extinction simply delayed? Can the surface ever be reclaimed, or will humans remain underground forever, slowly declining until the last community fails? Is there any possibility of peace or accommodation with the ARC forces, or is this conflict existential and permanent? The game's tone suggests that hope is justified but not guaranteed, that human effort matters even if ultimate victory is uncertain, that the struggle itself has meaning regardless of the eventual outcome. The relationship between different human factions is another area of developing narrative. Speranza and Toledo represent the communities we know, but there are obviously other groups with their own leadership, priorities, and approaches to survival. Some might be cooperating with each other. Some might be isolated and desperate. Some might have made dark compromises that more principled communities would reject. The potential for interhuman conflict based on resource competition or ideological differences adds complexity beyond the simple humans versus machines framing. The live service nature of ARC Raiders means that the story will continue to unfold through updates, events, and new content. The Breaking New Grounds event represents this approach, community-driven objectives that unlock new story elements and change the state of the world. This creates a sense that players are participating in an ongoing narrative rather than just experiencing a static story. The choices players make collectively, which areas to focus on, which objectives to prioritize, might influence how the story develops in future updates. The 10-year plan for the game suggests that Embark Studios has extensive lore prepared that will be revealed gradually. This long-term approach allows for mysteries to develop slowly, for seemingly minor details to gain significance later, for the world to evolve in response to both player actions and narrative revelations. The risk is maintaining player engagement over such an extended period, but the potential reward is a deeply developed world that feels genuinely alive and changing rather than static and predetermined. Theories about future revelations abound in the community. Will we discover the Exodus survivors' fate? Will communication be established with other global communities? Will the true nature of ARC be revealed? And if so, will that knowledge provide options for fighting back more effectively? Will humanity find a way to reclaim the surface? Or will the story be about accepting permanent underground existence and building a new civilization in the darkness? All of these remain open questions that keep players engaged with speculation and discussion between updates. The emotional core of ARC Raiders lore isn't really about the machines or the technology or the environmental catastrophe. It's about human resilience and meaning-making in impossible circumstances. The people of Speranza face a situation where rational calculation suggests they should just give up. The machines are stronger, more numerous, self-replicating, apparently inexhaustible. The surface is hostile, resources are limited, long-term survival seems unlikely. Yet they keep fighting, keep scavenging, keep building community and maintaining culture, and bringing new generations into a world that offers them nothing but struggle. This stubborn refusal to surrender even when defeat seems inevitable is fundamentally human in ways that machines can never emulate. It's not logical. It's not calculated for optimal outcomes. It's simply the choice to live with dignity and purpose rather than dying with resignation. Celeste's choice to name her district Speranza, hope, in the face of apparent hopelessness isn't naive optimism. It's a declaration that meaning exists independent of guaranteed success, that the fight matters even if victory is uncertain. The community and culture and human connection have value even when threatened with extinction. The raiders who venture topside aren't just gathering supplies, they're asserting humanity's continued claim to Earth's surface. They're refusing to accept the machine's occupation as permanent. They're demonstrating that humans can adapt, can learn, can fight back, even when overmatched. Every successful raid is a small victory, not just in material terms, but symbolically. Every time a raider returns with salvage, they've proven that humans can still take from the surface that was stolen from them. The underground communities maintaining culture in the tunnels, the music and art and storytelling, the relationships and families and social bonds, represent humanity's determination to be more than just survivors. They're choosing to be people, maintaining the things that make life worth living rather than just focusing on biological persistence. The cantinas, where raiders gather to share stories, the workshops, where craftspeople take pride in their work, the families raising children with hope for their future. These aren't luxuries, they're statements that human life has meaning beyond mere survival. This is what makes the lore of ARC raiders compelling. It's not a power fantasy where humanity is destined to triumph. It's a tragedy where people keep fighting knowing they might lose. It's a story about maintaining hope when circumstances justify despair, about building community when isolation would be safer, about choosing to live as humans rather than just surviving as animals. The machines are the threat, but the real story is about what remains when everything else is stripped away. And what remains is the human refusal to go quietly into extinction. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of ARC raiders, we've explored how environmental catastrophe broke civilization, how class divisions led to the exodus and the abandonment of billions, how humanity clawed back toward rebuilding only to face mechanical invasion from the sky. Not once, but twice. We've walked through the Rust Belt's haunted landscapes, from the towering betrayal of the Assera spaceport to the sand-buried cities that remember what was lost. We've examined the machines that hunt humanity across these spaces, understanding their capabilities and the mysteries of their origin. We've met the raiders who risk everything for survival and the traitors who support them. We've confronted the mysteries that remain unsolved and the questions that drive the narrative forward. The world of ARC raiders in 2180 is one where humanity has been pushed to the absolute edge but hasn't fallen over. It's a world where hope exists, not because circumstances warrant it, but because people choose to maintain it. It's a world where every day of continued existence is a victory, and where the struggle itself creates meaning, even when the outcome remains uncertain. The lore creates a rich foundation for the gameplay, giving weight and significance to mechanics that might otherwise feel purely tactical. As the game continues to develop through its planned decade of support, this world will deepen and evolve. New mysteries will be revealed while others emerge. The communities we've come to know will face new challenges and maybe discover new reasons for hope. The raiders will continue their dangerous work, gathering the resources that keep humanity alive one run at a time. The machines will continue to fall from the sky, relentless and mysterious, pushing humans to adapt or die. And through it all, the story of survival and resistance and stubborn human refusal to surrender will continue to unfold. Whether you're drawn to the environmental post-apocalyptic setting, the mysterious sci-fi elements of the ARC machines, the desperate survival narrative of underground communities, or the tactical gameplay of surface raids, the lore of ARC raiders provides depth and context that elevates everything. This isn't just a shooter with extraction mechanics. It's a complete world with history and tragedy and ongoing struggle that makes every match feel like it matters. Every piece of salvage recovered feel like a small victory in humanity's larger war for survival. If you've made it this far through this comprehensive exploration of ARC Raiders lore, thank you for joining me in the Rust Belt. If you enjoyed diving deep into this world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to All About the Lore for more deep dives into the stories behind your favorite games. Drop a comment letting me know what aspects of Ark Raiders lore you find most compelling or what questions you still want answered. And if there are other games whose lore you'd like me to explore, let me know and I'll add them to my list. Until next time, stay safe out there in whatever worlds you explore, and remember that even in the darkest times, hope is a choice that matters.